welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. We're really excited to welcome Carina Santa Maria on. She's the CEO of Shelter Youth and Family Services. And we're going to be talking about leadership when you are in a time of duress, or I'll call it out, crisis. And so Carina is going to really be an interesting, give us an interesting viewpoint as to how we can be leading. And I think we need to hear this message. So Carina, welcome. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you for this opportunity.
Well, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun each and every day because we have amazing sponsors who support us. And they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. But more importantly, Carina Santa Maria, CEO of Shelter and Youth Family Services. You can learn more about Carina and her team at -inc.org. Hey, Carina, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, you are a civic leader, a CEO, you run an organization with about 65 employees. Talk to us about what it is that Shelter Youth and Family Services, what do you do?
Sure. So Shelter Youth and Family Services is located in Arlington Heights, Illinois. We're just about 30 miles outside of Chicago, so we serve the whole Chicagoland area. But we are a licensed child welfare agency. And so here in Illinois, our Department of Children and Family Services contracts out about 85% of their work to agencies like Shelter Youth and Family Services. So we protect children, strengthen families, and empower communities. And we do that through various programming that we offer, one being our foster care and emergency shelters for youth in crisis. We also have a child abuse prevention program, as well as a mental health program, and we offer housing for youth experiencing homelessness or transitioning out of foster care.
Wow. So you do a lot, and I would imagine in a perilous environment all day long, 24/7.
24/7. We are open 24/7. We served last year a little over 650 children and family members in our area. So we have a pretty big reach with the amount of, we like to be called small but mighty, but I think we are definitely growing. And unfortunately, so are the needs of our community.
Right. How long have you been in service?
The shelter is celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, which is really exciting. So we were founded in 1975 by an Arlington Heights police officer.
Wow. Lots of changes, lots of opportunities, lots of education, lots of knowledge, lots of things going on. And over that trajectory of time, and then we go up to this point now, what are some of these impacts that you are seeing when we talk about federal and state policy shifts? And there have been a lot, and they keep coming. So we're still on this journey, right? Not everything is situated, but what are you seeing?
Sure. So federal and state policies aren't abstract, right? And so we know that they shape the daily lives of the people that nonprofits serve. Unfortunately, I do think that oftentimes nonprofits are forgotten about, but we are the ones who are left behind picking up the pieces and serving our community. We have seen this play out several times. So in Illinois, in about 2017, we had an Illinois state budget impasse. And so Shelter was about to actually shut down as an agency because Illinois could not pass a state budget and none of our services that we were offering were being paid for, even though we were legally obligated to perform them. Luckily, we were able to rely on our wonderful community and private donors to keep us up and running. And we did that. We were able to turn it around. And then 2 years later, COVID hits. And so we navigated that crisis as well. Again, a lot of policy and legislative changes during that time. federally, but also state and locally here. We had to also follow what our health department was saying, and how we provided services looked very different. Again, we were able to pick ourselves back up and keep moving forward, always embracing what the community needs and ensuring that those needs were met first. And now we're seeing the same problem right now. We know no matter where someone sits on the political spectrum, that the federal policies are going to have significant impacts on the people we serve. And so we've taken a lot of time internally to ensure how do we protect them as much as we can and make sure that our services are still being offered and doing what's best for the community.
It's absolutely riveting to think that COVID, in some ways, might have primed the pump or helped form you so that you could deal with these issues.
Yeah. It is. I feel like I aged like 50 years during COVID as an executive director, because every day it was changing. And it really did. We had to communicate and over communicate with our donors to let them know what was going on, because we weren't sure what was going to happen from a funding perspective, either from a state level or federally. We knew that there were so many needs, healthcare needs, people were dying every day. And then on our end, the gap of needs were widening and our resources were getting smaller and smaller. And so we had to pivot as well and ensure that we were finding the resources to get those services delivered.
Right. I've got to ask you somewhat of a next level question, in that we have all this funding volatility, but I'm going to call it out. We also have a lot of fatigue, and we have people that have just been like, "Oh, man, I was just in a crisis. I was just funding a crisis. Now there's another crisis." So how do you adapt to this funding volatility? Are you using the same playbook, or what is that looking like to the organization?
No, I think the playbook always changes because it looks different all the time. So for me personally, I've worked with our executive leadership team and our board to ensure that we have multiple contingency plans in place, thinking about what funding sources are high risk of being lost, what does making that up look like, and coming up with our own internal finance plan in case one of those funding sources drops. But also, again, I think the one thing that I can't stress enough is the communication and over communication with our donors, so that they know exactly what our needs are. If they don't know, they can't help us. And, I think we see it all play out on the news and we all hear stories, but it has impacted real people that we work with. And so communicating that with our donors is important.
Yeah, it's really an interesting aspect, because my sense of it is that if you are not communicating this, there will be others that communicate where they need,
Yeah,
and draw the attention and the financial support, dare I say, away from you and your organization.
for sure. And so we're all fighting for the very same vital dollars, not just from a public standpoint, but also within private donors. Our community can be small when it comes to who is helping support our agency. We have a lot of great nonprofits in our area that are doing very important, vital work. And so ensuring that, we show the impact that our donors have on the lives that we're serving and protecting is very important. And so we absolutely share those stories and impact so that they know what their investment is doing.
So let's explore that a little bit more, because you have a board, you have employees, you have stakeholders, you have local government. You said you were started by a police officer. You have support, agencies who know your organization. How do you leverage them to become the advocates that you need outside of programming? Like, that's a really interesting way of building champions, I think.
Absolutely. And I think For nonprofits in general, we need stronger, more intentional partnerships between government and nonprofits, right? So I think it's very important to talk to everybody about funding the front line. Don't just expect us to clean up the mess, but really encourage everyone that we are partners, and we need to ensure that we fund the mission-driven work that is happening here at Shelter, but also in our community. So calling upon all of those people, especially as nonprofits really navigate a funding landscape that is extremely unpredictable. We need to diversify, we need to communicate, we need to build all of our programming and leveraging everybody, because everyone needs to have a seat at a table to work together.
Yeah, it's really an interesting aspect of this. And I think sometimes um, we don't pay enough attention to this. So I love that you highlighted that aspect, because, again, more people that know about us and that can actually re-articulate, recommunicate what it is we need and where we are, the better everyone's going to be. I think also I've got to ask this one question. 50 years ago, when your organization was started, the American public, the global public, had certain views and ideas about what your population was going through.
Mm-hmm.
And we've changed and morphed. I would like to say we've become more educated. Does that change the role of advocacy at all? Are we through that?
No, absolutely. I think one specific population that we serve, we're actually building Illinois' first DCFS approved home for child victims of human trafficking. Currently, we're building that programming, but also the physical structure as well. But the thought of what that looks like or who's involved in human trafficking is extremely different than what the public perceives it to be. So we find ourselves educating people all the time and the community of what that looks like. It's not the child that's necessarily being stolen at Target, but there's huge intersectionality between children involved in foster care and vulnerable populations who are being coerced and targeted because they are vulnerable. So it's our duty to understand the issue, so that we're educated on it and know how to protect the children in our community as well. But I think education and advocacy both play a huge piece in everyone's buy-in into our mission.
Wow, very interesting. Well, let's talk about this notion of the arc of your journey and the story. And as you said, education and things changing. How can you lead or see your leadership changing and impacting, with innovation? And we're seeing this word resilience used a lot, but also systems changes. What is that? How is that impacting your organization right now?
Yeah, so I always say that systems change and advocacy is actually financial strategy. Nonprofits need to advocate not just for their communities, but for funding models that work. Also, a lot of times that might not look like public dollars, but it can. We need to, make sure that nonprofits show up in capitals across the country and also in our capital, and local government. And the more stable and respected we become, the more I think those public dollars will just continue to fund us. But in the meantime, also continuing that private work. We did a very intentional shift this past year, away from event-based fundraising, right? It's very easy to have an event that's going to cost X amount of dollars to just raise maybe a couple dollars more. But
Yep.
put that time and energy into building relationships with your donors and showing them that what they're doing is investing in the work that you're doing and in the community, not just by attending a trivia night or a gala, but how every dollar that they're donating really impacts the lives of the children that we're serving and the families.
Yeah, I love that. Now, we were talking about this in the green room briefly, and this is a good time for me to make sure everyone knows that one of our co-hosts, extraordinaire, Sherry Quam Taylor, introduced us to you. But that's a bold thing to navigate away from event-based fundraising. Um, had to be somewhat of a tough sell to some of your team members and your board.
Oh yeah, sometimes it still is. I was lucky. I had a development director at the time who was just such a big picture thinker, and she really pushed me into this. And I'm so thankful for her vision and her strategy. And so she connected us with Sherry, and Sherry is just, you can listen to her talk all the time because it just makes sense, but you get that, and you get the gut feeling of this is the right move, but I'm a little scared. And there were times, especially in the first couple of months, where we bypassed some of the events that we typically had in those months, and we didn't see the revenue coming in because it takes time to build the relationships with people and ensuring that you have a pipeline and going through that process. But it paid off. It was the first time ever in the history of our nonprofit that we raised the goal that we needed to raise. And so we were able to raise $1.8 million just last fiscal year by putting that time and effort and strategic thought into a major fundraising versus event-based fundraising.
I love it. I love hearing that. I think that it's really tough to give up an event just because it's, love it or hate it. It's kind of one of those things that you're like, well, we know it's going to be, this trajectory, this amount of money, this activity level, all those things. And it's frightening to walk away from that.
Absolutely. And it was hard to even get, I don't want to say it's hard to get the board buy-in, but it was tough. And I think they all saw the value, but their responsibility is to have fiduciary oversight of the agency. So they were seeing it from a very risk averse lens, which I completely understand that is 100% their job. And so getting them to really fully understand the importance and that we can get there. It was nerve-wracking for all of us, but to know that I had their support and their trust, I really respect them for really believing in me and this strategy. I think it's really important, and it shows that it works.
Yeah. I got to ask this question. Do you feel like in this time of change that your credibility factor has risen? And as you go forward, making recommendations to your board, even your stakeholders, even your larger funders, that because you had the success, you're going to get better buy-in at an easier rate? Or has that played out yet?
Yeah, no, I think so. I had a very unique story that I had, or an opportunity, I should say, is I had a major donor come to me and tell me, Carina, I trust you and I trust your vision. I'm going to give you $50,000 to come up with an idea. And I actually don't care if your idea is successful. I just want you to think outside the box because I want to see what you can do. And to have somebody believe in me that much meant a lot. And so I did not want to let him down because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's very hard to get donors to understand the importance of funding ideas or overhead or infrastructure. But again, all of those things go back into the importance of financial strategy. That $50,000 idea turned into this $5 million project of being Illinois' first DCFS approved home. So he's now going to see the impact that his trust in me had. And it's a 6,400 square foot home that's going to serve 12 kids at one time. But those movements mean big things, and nonprofits can do big things. And I think the thought that, it's just a nonprofit, it's different than a business, needs to go away. We are business partners. We think strategically. We have to navigate more loopholes and hurdles than any corporate CEO has to. And so we deserve that respect, and also that we should be invested in, and our leadership should be invested in. So I hope that example has helped build credibility among our donors, but also just hearing and seeing the work that we've done and the success that we've had.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into that a little bit more as we kind of finish up our conversation today. And I warned you in the green room that it goes by fast. It really does. I know. and I could talk to you forever because I'm just absolutely riveted by your story. But you shared this story, and you have other stories that you come across day in and day out because of who the population you work with and the history of your organization. Where do you draw that line between being more, tugging at the heartstrings, the trauma porn nature that sometimes we fall into that trap, versus really leading with stories of success? What do you see, and how do you see this coming together for our sector as a whole?
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought that up because I do think that that is something nonprofits greatly struggle with. How do we show our impact? How do you even measure impact, especially when it's lives? And sometimes impact for us or success for us means very different things. A child graduating from high school who comes from a family where they may not have ever graduated before is a huge success and needs to be celebrated. But sometimes I think people are expecting, you know, a football player or someone who's a millionaire or who has done all these things, but success means different things for different people. So for us, it's how do we invest in that person's life, whether it be education, safety, housing. I use a case for support. That is something that Sherry had worked with Shelter very early on so that we can show what an investment looks like, even from a financial standpoint. When I started 7 years ago, we were a $1.8 million agency, and we're starting this fiscal year at $11.2 million. And that was a significant growth just in 7 years. And so that shows impact too, by not having to go towards that route of, sharing the pulling at the heartstrings, but how an investment really makes a really big, significant change. But we do share our stories. We have videos online from people who themselves have come to us and said, we want to share our story because we fully believe in the work that Shelter does. Our current board chair was one of our previous foster parents who adopted her children through Shelter. So she has videos of her story because it has impacted her and it has impacted her children. So we do share those stories, but again, we want to make sure that we're doing it in a very trauma sensitive way and show more of our strategic impacts that we've had versus the heartstrings and the personal stories.
Right. There's such a fine line. And I would say that, like, early in my career, it was all about the drama and the trauma. That was what the thought was that would elicit response and get people to, open up their checkbooks. And that's not just the individual giver, that's the institutional funder, that's the corporate partner. And I'm glad to see that that's changing, I should say, changing, that we, are using a more impactful lens and looking at, not just the morality of a decision, but the economic impact, the social impact, why it makes sense to be a stronger civil society by making these investments. And so that's really cool that you all have been able to kind of navigate that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a shift, and there are people who still ask for those stories, or what's our video going to be at the gala so that people can cry and donate.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the story that we're telling. I think the work that we do has a bigger impact, even from a policy perspective. And how do we become a thought partner in the child welfare space? And those are the impacts that we really want to show.
Yeah. I keep going back to the legacy factor of your organization. I mean, 50 years in thought leadership and education and advocacy on these topics has radically changed,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, how we are educating our social workers, our law enforcement, first responders. Think how much the topic has changed, right? And so it's absolutely fascinating to think that you're having to do all this work at the same time, raise money and educate people and create, almost, dare I say, a new mindset.
Absolutely. And I think about, we've built so many partnerships, and it's, to your point, almost re-educating people. And then also, again, like demanding a seat at the table, I think is really important. And that's something that we continue to work on. But I think that that's such a good point.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Well, you've been a delight to talk with, and I've learned so much from you. I'm thrilled that our co-host Sherry Quam Taylor connected us so we could learn more about you. I understand you're going to have a busy day today. I think every day in your life is probably incredibly busy, but this is somebody that you need to watch. Learn more about Carina Santa Maria, the CEO of Shelter Youth and Family Services. You can learn more about their work and see the impact of their work at shelter-inc.org. That again is Shelter Youth and Family Services, working outside of Chicago. You know, Carina, it's an interesting time in America, and I really applaud you for being a leader who is looking at things in a new way and not just trying to be I don't know, protective, or, just like we're not going to lean in. We're just going to hunker down type of thing, which I think in a time of duress is really, it's easy just to kind of retreat and not lean in. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much. I think one of the biggest things I've taken away from this experience just in the past couple of years is also learning to stand up and say no. No, I'm not going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. It's okay to say that and to show our expertise and our leadership, and we can be bold, and we should be bold. And I say to all my fellow CEOs, nonprofit CEOs, like, demand your seat at that table because we deserve it.
I love it. Those are wise words to end on. And I love that message for the viewers and listeners of the Nonprofit Show. Again, Carina Santa Maria, watch this young leader. This is going to be a great story to say that you were able to learn from her and hear about her mission and her work. You know, we are here day in and day out in our 6th year, marching towards our 1400th episode, 1,400, because we have these amazing partners, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. These are the folks that join us day in and day out so we can learn from leaders like Carina. And this is just imperative for our sector. And so we want to make sure that we extend our gratitude towards them. Carina, every day we end each episode of the Nonprofit Show with this message. And today I'm going to be thinking about you. And the message goes like this: to stay well so you can do well.